The eyes of influence, CIA, guardians, observers, and shapers of the modern world. The story of the Central Intelligence Agency began in the aftermath of global upheaval. When the world was emerging from the shadows of the Second World War and stepping into a tense new era, questions echoed through the halls of governments and among leaders. How do we protect national interests in a world where threats can arise silently from far beyond our borders? Who watches over the unseen, the unknown, the dangers that ordinary eyes cannot perceive? It was in this environment of uncertainty that the CIA was born. Officially established in 1947 with the passage of the National Security Act, tasked with the mission of coordinating intelligence and safeguarding the nation. Its creation marked a turning point. The United States now had a dedicated entity focused not only on collecting information, but interpreting it, anticipating threats, and influencing outcomes before crises could materialize. From the very beginning, the agency faced enormous challenges. The post-war world was fragmented, ideologically divided, and rapidly evolving. Former allies became competitors, while new powers rose with unpredictable agendas. The CIA had to establish its identity, learn the language of intelligence, and create a network capable of seeing beyond borders. Early operations required blending human ingenuity with the technology of the era: cryptography, covert communications, and painstaking field reconnaissance. Analysts pored over intercepted communications, debriefed agents returning from perilous assignments, and traced the faintest clues across continents. Every fragment of information could contain the seed of a larger threat, a hidden pattern invisible to those untrained in the craft of intelligence. One of the agency's earliest imperatives was to track the growing influence of the Soviet Union, whose reach was expanding into Europe, Asia, and beyond. Analysts and operatives were sent into the field, often in hazardous conditions, tasked with observing political shifts, monitoring military movements, and reporting clandestine activity. These early missions were fraught with risk and uncertainty, but they established foundational practices: meticulous verification of sources, careful analysis of seemingly minor details, and a continuous effort to understand the intentions of foreign powers. Each operation, each intercepted message, each seemingly inconsequential observation contributed to a broader understanding mosaic of intelligence that would guide policymakers in Washington. The philosophy of the agency quickly evolved. Beyond mere collection, the CIA became a center of analysis and foresight. Teams were trained to detect subtle signals, a sudden reshuffling of officials in a distant embassy, unexplained changes in trade patterns, or the discreet arrival of unfamiliar equipment. These signals, when combined with historical knowledge and geopolitical insight, allowed the agency to forecast potential crises. It was this predictive capability that would distinguish the CIA from traditional military or diplomatic intelligence. The ability to see what others could not, to anticipate before reaction, to shape outcomes quietly yet decisively. Even in these early years, the agency understood that intelligence was a collaborative effort, not confined to a single office or individual. Networks of human sources, field operatives, and analysts worked in tandem with partner nations and allied intelligence services. Sharing information and verifying its authenticity was as critical then as it is today. The silent horizon, a term later used to describe the agency's philosophy of unseen vigilance, was already taking shape in practice. Eyes that watched constantly, systems that recorded ceaselessly, minds that interpreted patterns invisible to the untrained observer. Yet the CIA's story was not just one of internal operations and secret missions. Its influence extended into global perception and diplomacy. Foreign governments, observers, and sometimes even adversaries began to recognize the agency as a powerful entity capable of shaping events from behind the scenes. In some circles, it was seen as a guardian of stability, a necessary counterbalance to unpredictable actors on the world stage. In others, it was a shadowy force whose reach was intimidating, enigmatic, and omnipresent. From its inception, the agency carried the dual burden of operational secrecy and public scrutiny, a paradox that continues to define its role today. Field operations were carefully coordinated, blending observation, communication, and occasional intervention. Agents in Europe reported on emerging political factions. In Asia, analysts tracked trade routes and the flow of intelligence materials. Every mission was a thread in a growing web of understanding, complex lattice connecting micro-level details to macro-level strategy. Early successes, though often unrecognized publicly, demonstrated the value of foresight and preparation. A minor disruption intercepted before it escalated into conflict. A hidden network identified and neutralized. A crisis averted by anticipating human behavior and geopolitical dynamics. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the CIA had cemented foundational strategies that would carry through decades. The integration of field operations with analytical assessment, the constant verification of intelligence, and the establishment of an ethos of vigilance that never rested. From this period emerged the agency's first major accomplishments in shaping international outcomes, guiding policy decisions, and maintaining a subtle, stabilizing presence in a volatile world. It was a lesson in patience, observation, and the power of foresight, the principle that would define its operations for generations. As history unfolded, the early CIA demonstrated that intelligence was not simply about secrecy or covert action. It was about understanding the world's intricate patterns, predicting outcomes, and acting with precision and discretion. The agency's first years established a legacy, the creation of systems, methods, and a mindset capable of protecting national security in an increasingly complex, interconnected world. The origins of shadows, the birth of watchful eyes, and the establishment of an unseen guiding presence formed the foundation upon which all future operations would be built. In these formative years, every assignment carried weight. Every report, every coded communication, every subtle observation contributed to a growing archive of knowledge. Analysts, operatives, and advisors operated with the understanding that foresight was as critical as action, and that sometimes the smallest detail could be the precursor to significant global shifts. The lessons learned during these years remain embedded in the CIA's culture: vigilance, analytical rigor, and the unyielding pursuit of clarity in a world filled with uncertainty. The agency's first decades were defined by these early operations, by the cultivation of intelligence networks, and by the meticulous practice of observing and interpreting the invisible. From its creation to its initial missions around the globe, the CIA established not only a presence but a philosophy: that the eyes of influence, trained and vigilant, could guide a nation through the perils of a rapidly changing world, and that understanding the unseen was the truest path to safeguarding the seen. By the mid-1950s, the CIA had moved beyond its nascent phase into an era defined by both expansion and innovation. The Cold War was intensifying, and the agency recognized that threats to national security were no longer confined to visible battlefields. Invisible networks, ideological campaigns, and technological developments demanded a new approach: intelligence capability capable of seeing patterns across continents, anticipating crises before they emerged, and subtly influencing global events to maintain stability. It was no longer enough to simply observe. The agency had to analyze, predict, and sometimes intervene in ways that would remain invisible to the public eye. Analytical departments underwent a transformation. Teams of specialists emerged, combining expertise in politics, economics, sociology, and emerging technologies. Data streams flowed from field operatives, diplomatic channels, financial reports, and intercepted communications, converging into centralized centers of analysis. Here, the CIA pioneered methods of predictive intelligence, using both human insight and early computational models to detect trends and signals that could indicate regional instability, ideological shifts, or covert operations. Every anomaly was treated as a potential piece of a larger mosaic. Analysts worked tirelessly, connecting micro-level observations to macro-level implications, ensuring that policymakers were provided with actionable insights rooted in both context and foresight. Global operations had also expanded dramatically. The agency's presence now spanned multiple continents, employing networks of assets capable of discreetly gathering information in politically sensitive regions. Operatives monitored military developments, tracked the movements of key political figures, and observed patterns of trade, finance, and communication that could indicate emerging threats. At the same time, CIA analysts interpreted signals that might otherwise be invisible: subtle shifts in public sentiment, unexplained infrastructure projects, or changes in diplomatic behavior. Each observation, no matter how seemingly minor, was meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced, revealing connections that were invisible to untrained eyes. The agency's role extended beyond mere observation. Covert operations were increasingly employed to influence outcomes favorable to national interests. These actions ranged from discreet support for friendly political movements to the disruption of activities deemed harmful to U.S. strategic objectives. However, each operation was guided by rigorous analysis, careful risk assessment, and an acute awareness of global perception. Success required precision and discretion. Actions had to achieve strategic objectives without creating unintended diplomatic consequences or public scrutiny. The CIA's influence was subtle but pervasive, shaping the environment in ways that often remained invisible even to those affected by its operations. Simultaneously, the agency pioneered innovations in technology and methodology. Cryptography, signals intelligence, and early computational systems transformed the speed and accuracy with which data could be analyzed. Analysts could now process volumes of information previously unimaginable, uncovering patterns across time zones and political systems. Satellite reconnaissance, still in its infancy, provided unprecedented views of terrain, military installations, and logistical movements. Combined with human intelligence, these technological advances allowed the agency to map global activity with increasing precision, anticipating potential crises and advising decision-makers on preventive measures. At the same time, the CIA was acutely aware of the importance of perception. Internationally, reactions to the agency were complex. Allied nations often regarded the CIA as a guardian of shared security interests, capable of providing critical intelligence and maintaining strategic balance. At the same time, adversaries viewed it as an omnipresent shadow, capable of infiltrating political systems and influencing events from behind the scenes. Public opinion was even more nuanced. Some celebrated its role in safeguarding national interests, while others criticized its secrecy and questioned its methods. Understanding these perceptions became as important as gathering intelligence itself. The agency knew that shaping outcomes sometimes depended on anticipating not only the actions of adversaries, but also the beliefs and reactions of global audiences. Field operatives and analysts worked in tandem, translating raw intelligence into coherent narratives that could inform strategic decisions. They examined patterns in communications, trade, migration, and military movement, often detecting signals invisible to conventional observers. Subtle anomalies, a shift in shipping routes, an unusual spike in political discourse, or a minor technological development were scrutinized for significance. Using this multi-layered approach, the CIA created predictive models that allowed policymakers to act proactively, rather than reactively, in a world where seconds could determine outcomes and unseen threats could escalate rapidly. The agency's operations during this period demonstrated the increasing sophistication of intelligence work. Lessons from early successes and failures informed the development of structured analytical frameworks, the training of field operatives, and the integration of emerging technologies. The combination of human expertise and technological innovation created a force multiplier, enhancing the CIA's ability to anticipate global developments and intervene subtly to protect national interests. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, these capabilities were tested repeatedly. Political crises, regional conflicts, and ideological contests unfolded around the world, providing both challenges and opportunities for the agency. Each engagement required careful calibration, understanding the motivations of multiple actors, assessing risks, and determining when intervention or restraint would best serve long-term objectives. The CIA's reputation grew as a result, recognized internationally for its ability to anticipate developments, provide early warning, and offer strategic insights that shaped policy at the highest levels. At the same time, the agency cultivated a culture of continuous learning and adaptation. Analysts, operatives, and leadership recognized that global dynamics were in constant flux, and that yesterday's strategies might not apply to tomorrow's challenges. This adaptive mindset became a defining feature of the CIA's analytical revolution, enabling it to remain relevant and effective across decades of geopolitical change. Knowledge management, interdepartmental coordination, and meticulous documentation ensured that insights from one operation informed future efforts, creating an institutional memory that became as valuable as any single field asset in every corner of its operations. The CIA embraced the principle of integration. Human intelligence complemented technological surveillance. Field reports informed analytical models, and lessons from history guided the interpretation of emerging patterns. This approach allowed the agency to see beyond immediate events, to anticipate cascading effects, and to advise decision-makers with unparalleled insight. The expansion of influence, both operationally and analytically, marked a critical phase in the CIA's history, a period where foresight became as crucial as action, and where the agency solidified its role as a guardian and shaper of the modern world. By the close of this era, the CIA had established a sophisticated global presence, a culture of analytical rigor, and an operational philosophy centered on proactive observation and subtle influence. It had moved from reactive intelligence gathering to a model of predictive and preventive strategy, capable of identifying potential threats before they emerged and shaping outcomes without overt intervention. The seeds of modern intelligence practice had been sown, and the agency's eyes of influence continued to scan the globe. Alert and unwavering, ever ready to guide the nation through the uncertainties of an evolving world. The world of intelligence was vast, complex, and continuously evolving. By the late 20th century, the CIA had developed into a network that spanned continents, connecting operatives, analysts, technology, and allies in an intricate web of observation and influence. What had begun as a small post-war organization had grown into an institution capable of anticipating threats, shaping foreign outcomes, and interpreting the subtle currents of global change. This expansion was not simply physical. It represented a revolution in methodology, foresight, and global awareness. The agency's operatives and analysts had learned to see the world not as static events, but as interlinked signals, each movement rippling across borders and systems in ways invisible to ordinary observers. In the operations centers of Langley and other secure facilities, analysts worked around the clock. Walls lined with screens displayed real-time satellite imagery, signals intelligence, financial transactions, social media chatter, and diplomatic communications. Each data point, no matter how small, was treated as a potential key to understanding a larger pattern. Analysts sifted through oceans of information, connecting seemingly unrelated events, anomalies in shipping routes, subtle changes in diplomatic activity, irregular cyber traffic to form coherent narratives. Predictive models transformed these narratives into actionable intelligence, allowing the agency to advise policymakers, deploy assets, and influence outcomes before crises fully materialized. Simultaneously, CIA operatives moved quietly in the field, sometimes in hostile environments, observing, reporting, and occasionally intervening to protect national interests. Their presence was rarely acknowledged publicly, yet their work shaped outcomes across the globe. These operatives monitored political shifts, military movements, industrial projects, and technological developments. Reporting minute changes that could signal emerging threats. Each observation was cross-referenced with historical data, geopolitical analysis, and intelligence from allied sources to ensure precision. Human insight complemented technological surveillance, bridging gaps that satellites, sensors, and algorithms could not fully cover. The agency's global footprint was complemented by an understanding of perception how nations, populations, and rival agencies viewed the CIA's role. Allies often regarded the agency as a critical partner, providing early warnings and insights that could prevent destabilization and promote stability. Yet adversaries viewed the CIA with suspicion, perceiving it as a shadowy influence capable of shaping political outcomes through covert means. Public opinion varied widely. In some countries, the agency was seen as a protector of global order. In others, it was a symbol of clandestine power. Recognizing this spectrum of perception was as crucial as intelligence collection itself, for success often depended on anticipating reactions as much as actions. Field reports flowed into central hubs, where analysts transformed raw data into intelligence assessments. Subtle signals a spike in online discourse, unusual financial flows. Unexplained logistics activity were interpreted in context. Analysts applied predictive algorithms alongside historical patterns, cultural understanding, and geopolitical acumen. What appeared to be minor disruptions were frequently the early signs of coordinated campaigns, whether political, economic, or technological. By combining diverse sources, the CIA constructed a multidimensional map of global activity, capable of revealing potential crises weeks or months before they became apparent to the wider world. Global operations also required careful coordination with allies. Sharing intelligence enhanced collective security while ensuring that actions were precise and minimally disruptive. Partner nations relied on the CIA's ability to integrate human intelligence, signals analysis, and open-source information into comprehensive reports. This collaborative network magnified the agency's influence, enabling strategic decisions based on foresight rather than reaction. At the same time, liaison operations allowed the CIA to monitor threats in regions where direct access was limited, relying on partners to provide critical insights that would otherwise remain inaccessible. The agency's technological evolution amplified its operational capabilities. Advanced satellites, cyber monitoring systems, and surveillance tools allowed for unprecedented observation. Nightly shifts of analysts continuously tracked anomalies, heat signatures from industrial facilities, unusual communications patterns, and subtle shifts in troop deployments. Predictive analytics transformed these anomalies into probable outcomes, allowing leadership to prepare in advance. Human analysts contextualized these findings, ensuring that interpretations were grounded in cultural, historical, and political realities. The combination of technology and human judgment created a system capable of seeing far ahead, reducing uncertainty and enhancing strategic foresight. Public perception was managed carefully. While the CIA operated in secrecy, the agency's successes often shaped global stability, trade security, and diplomatic outcomes. Governments and citizens rarely saw the full extent of these interventions, yet they experienced the consequences of intelligence-led actions. Crises avoided, conflicts mitigated, and global threats anticipated. Maintaining this delicate balance of operational secrecy and strategic influence became a defining feature of the agency's global operations. Analysts and operatives alike understood that subtlety was as powerful as force. As the 21st century unfolded, the CIA continued to integrate new technologies, refine analytical methods, and expand global operations. Satellite constellations, AI-assisted predictive models, cyber surveillance, and advanced human intelligence networks were fused into a seamless whole. The agency's operatives adapted to rapidly changing geopolitical landscapes, while analysts provided insight that turned data into knowledge and knowledge into foresight. Every movement, every anomaly, every signal became part of a continuous narrative, guiding decisions that affected millions of lives across continents. In every office, in every field post, The CIA exemplified its dual mission: to observe the unseen and to influence outcomes in ways that maintain security and stability. Global operations and perception were inseparable. Understanding not only the movements of people and nations, but also how the agency itself was perceived, proved crucial. By carefully interpreting these signals and acting with precision, the CIA ensured that it remained a guardian and shaper of a world constantly in flux. Its influence quiet yet profound, its vigilance unbroken, and its eyes always observing. The world was changing faster than ever. New technologies, shifting alliances, and unpredictable actors created an environment of constant uncertainty. Within the walls of the CIA, analysts and operatives adapted to these emerging challenges with the same precision that had defined the agency for decades. From cyber warfare to clandestine diplomacy, from satellite reconnaissance to cultural intelligence, every domain was being redefined, requiring strategies as fluid and dynamic as the threats themselves. In Langley's intelligence centers, monitors streamed live feeds from across the globe, satellite imagery, encrypted communications, social media analytics, economic transactions, and field reports from human assets. Analysts scanned for anomalies, looking for subtle shifts that could indicate the rise of a new threat. Small deviations, an unexpected shipment of materials, sudden communications among fringe networks. A minor political protest were never dismissed as coincidence. Every signal was examined, cross-referenced, and contextualized. Emerging threats often began as whispers. The CIA's adaptive strategies ensured those whispers were heard and understood before they escalated. Dr. Nadia Al-Rusheed, a senior cyber intelligence specialist, worked alongside Lieutenant David Hayes, a field operations strategist. Together, they analyzed a series of seemingly unrelated events: unusual cyber activity targeting critical infrastructure in Southeast Asia, minor troop movements in Eastern Europe, and covert financial flows in the Middle East. On their own, these events appeared disconnected, but the CIA's adaptive models revealed patterns pointing toward coordinated, multi-layered campaigns by unknown actors. Predictive simulations helped them forecast potential outcomes and craft preemptive countermeasures. Adaptive strategy at the CIA was not just reactive, it was anticipatory. Analysts studied historical precedents, behavioral patterns, and geopolitical trends to craft contingency plans that could pivot as situations evolved. When a threat emerged in one domain, cyber, kinetic, or political lit often intersected with others. A cyber attack on energy infrastructure could destabilize markets, which in turn could trigger political unrest. Recognizing these interconnections was essential to preserving global stability and protecting national interests. Meanwhile, field operatives executed operations that required discretion, precision, and adaptability. They gathered intelligence on emerging networks, monitored suspicious logistics, and engaged with local contacts who could provide insights impossible to obtain through digital surveillance alone. Each mission was carefully coordinated with Central Command, integrating real-time updates with predictive models. Operatives relied on adaptive strategies to remain flexible, improvising when conditions changed while maintaining mission objectives and operational security. Emerging threats were not always conventional. Cyber adversaries developed increasingly sophisticated malware. Social media manipulation became a tool of influence, and financial networks funded operations that could destabilize entire regions. The CIA's adaptive strategies incorporated cutting-edge technology, machine learning algorithms to detect anomalies, AI predictive models to forecast risk scenarios, and advanced analytics to correlate disparate signals. Yet human judgment remained paramount. Analysts interpreted the data, accounted for cultural nuances, and evaluated the intentions behind observable behaviors. Technology augmented insight, but intuition, experience, and contextual understanding were irreplaceable. In a simulation lab, analysts tested scenarios that merged political, economic, and technological variables. They considered outcomes ranging from minor disruptions to large-scale crises. Every variable was scrutinized, and strategies were refined to accommodate uncertainty. These exercises ensured that when a real threat appeared, the CIA could respond immediately with tailored, adaptive measures. The agency's ability to pivot quickly was critical, ensuring threats were neutralized before they could escalate. Global perception remained a key component. Allies relied on the CIA to provide actionable intelligence, while adversaries observed its influence warily. The agency had to act decisively while managing the optics of its operations. Adaptive strategies were designed not only to address threats, but also to preserve the agency. As credibility and operational effectiveness in the eyes of the international community. Missteps could compromise missions, erode trust, and embolden adversaries. Understanding perception became as vital as understanding the threat itself. Technology, human intelligence, and foresight merged seamlessly in the CIA's approach. Field reports were constantly integrated with cyber monitoring, financial analysis, and satellite reconnaissance. Each anomaly was examined within the context of global patterns, creating a comprehensive picture that informed both immediate responses and long-term strategic planning. Threats that were invisible to the untrained eye became discernible, allowing leadership to act preemptively rather than reactively. By the end of a long operational cycle, analysts produced intelligence assessments that identified potential crises, evaluated probabilities, and suggested intervention strategies. These reports guided policymakers, military planners, and allied nations, providing insight that shaped decisions at the highest levels. Adaptive strategies ensured the CIA remained agile in an unpredictable world, capable of responding to both conventional and unprecedented threats. As night fell, operations continued unabated. Analysts rotated through shifts, satellites maintained constant observation, and field operatives stayed alert in critical locations. The complexity of the modern threat landscape demanded unbroken vigilance, and the CIA's commitment to adaptive strategy ensured that no challenge went unnoticed or unaddressed. The agency had learned to evolve continuously, turning uncertainty into actionable intelligence and preparing the world for dangers that had yet to emerge. Every strategy, every response, and every observation was part of a larger continuum and orchestration of foresight, judgment, and adaptability. In the shadows of geopolitics and technological change, the CIA operated as both observer and shaper, continuously monitoring, analyzing, and preparing for the unpredictable currents of the modern world. Public engagement prompt English. Share where you're watching from and your thoughts on how intelligence shapes global security. Comment below with your perspective, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support continued documentary content. Channel Disclaimer English. This documentary is for informational purposes only. It is based on publicly available records and historical accounts. The channel does not take sides or pass judgment on political, social, or international matters. The narrative is intended solely for educational and documentary use.